Okay, well, we'll go ahead and I think we're about there. I don't know if PowerPoint's taking its time. It's coming. It's coming. It's loading. We will see it load. It's coming eventually.
I know these things are good for that, that's why I'm watching. I can't already, I already got a breathing problem. That doesn't for me.
All right, so here we go. We should be got it. There we go. There, we're there.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing there,
Looks good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then we are ready to go, and we will. We're going to start out by after we move this back over from being bumped over. Okay. So, kind of shifting back to the nature of God and the character of God. We started out talking about the nature of God and the character of God. Then we shifted into other spiritual beings and kind of ended with humanity as a new humanity that God was trying to create in us. It's in the image of Jesus, and really in the image that God created for us as well. And so it becomes kind of that question becomes, okay, so what is this God like that we want to be in the image of? And we started out when we were talking about the character of God, we started out focusing on Exodus 34, 6, and 7. But we're going to 6 provides the outline for some of the upcoming discussions on the character of God. We may have to jump it back and forth between these outlines because Bible Project guys are still working on a lot of these yet. But we've got some other stuff on the nature of God we can switch in and shift back and forth through. But when it comes to the character of God, it's you see the five highlighted phrases there, or bold: compassion, mercy, slow to anger, unfailing love, and faithfulness. This is how God revealed himself to Moses back on the mount where he gave the Ten Commandments. And it was also, this was at the time that Israel was already breaking the covenant, that he was saying, I am slow to anger. I am compassionate. I will bring judgment on people, but I am slow to carry out that judgment because I really, my heart is compassion and mercy. So we're going to talk about the compassion of God today as we talk about, as we begin to look at the character of God. So we're going to jump over to one of the videos from the Bible Project on compassion. And just realized I needed to do something here. That would sound better.
Right.
Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see?
I hear.
Can you see?
I read.
Can you see? Can you see? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know if you should.
If you tried to describe what God is like, it could be difficult or daunting. But when the people who wrote the Bible pondered the mystery of God, they consistently described God's character in this way: compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. The very first word used in this description of God is compassionate, or in Hebrew, rachum. This word also appears as a noun, rachamim, or compassion. And what's fascinating is that both of these words are related to the Hebrew word for womb, rechem. So compassion in the Hebrew Bible is centered on a person's core, and the word invites us to imagine a mother's tender feelings for her vulnerable infant. So rahum is a word that conveys intense emotion. Sometimes it's even translated as deeply moved, like in the story of King Solomon, who meets two women who've just given birth. One of their babies sadly dies, but then both women claim that the baby still living is theirs. As a test, Solomon says to cut the baby in two and give each mother a half. And the baby's real mother is deeply moved. She would rather the other woman take her baby than see her child die. And it's her compassion that reveals that she's the true mother. But rahum isn't just an emotional word. It also involves action. And surprisingly, the word is used most often to describe God's actions, motivated by his emotions. Like when the Israelites are suffering and oppressed in Egypt, God hears their cries and is compelled by his compassion, his rachamim, to rescue them. Then, as the Israelites travel through the dangerous wilderness, they're hungry and thirsty, and God is Rahum, caring for them as his own child. He provides everything they need, food, water, and clothing, as he personally guides them. So it's no surprise that when Yahweh reveals his character to the Israelites in the wilderness, he begins by saying he's compassionate. But despite Yahweh's continual rachamim, the Israelites turn away from him time and again. They reject Yahweh's compassion and instead give their allegiance to other gods. And rather than showing compassion to each other, they do violence. And their rebellion results in exile, and they're scattered among the nations. And it's in this dark moment in Israel's story that we come to the book of Isaiah, where Yahweh compares himself to a mother full of rachamim toward her baby. He says, "Can a mother forget her nursing child, or have no compassion or rachamim on the child of her womb? Even if she forgets, I will not forget you." God is full of motherly compassion, and he will rescue his people. And as you read further in Isaiah, you realize that God is going to do this by entering into the suffering of humanity. And this points forward to a time when Jesus comes on the scene. He is Yahweh's deep compassion become human. In Greek, the word compassion is oiktirmos. And as Jesus embraces the sick and cares for the outcast, he is deeply moved by human suffering. Jesus compares himself to a mother hen using her wings to shield her chicks from danger as he gathers people into his embrace. And in the ultimate expression of oiktirmos, Jesus is moved by compassion to enter into humanity's suffering, into death itself, to rescue and bring us near to God. And it's this same life of compassion that Jesus calls his followers to imitate, allowing ourselves to be moved by the pain of others, to embrace the hurting, and to participate in relieving suffering in the world. In this way, we too can embody the compassion of Yahweh, or in Jesus' words, be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Now you can see how fitting it is that compassionate is the first word God uses to describe himself. So when we're in pain or see others suffering, we can be certain that God is deeply moved to respond, and that he's there to meet us with his deep compassion.
I'll leave it there, and we'll jump back to the slides. But I like the way it takes, it presents that image of the mother being the image of God's compassion, and the number of verses that you take that motherly, maternal instinct and demonstrate it with as some of God's heart towards us. It's not, commonly we speak of God as a father, but there's equally a number of verses in the Bible that refer to him in this maternal way. And we're going to look at a couple of them that were mentioned or alluded to in the video. The first one being Isaiah 49:13-18. Somebody want to start maybe reading? It's 2 slides. Somebody want to read the first one?
I'll read. Sing for joy, O heavens. Rejoice, O earth. Burst in song, O mountains. For the Lord has comforted his people and will have compassion on them in their suffering. Yet Jerusalem says, the Lord has deserted us. The Lord has forgotten us. Never can a mother forget her nursing child. Can she feel no love for the child she has born? But even if that were possible, I would not forget you. See, I have written your name on the palms of my hands. Always in my hands is a picture of Jerusalem's walls and ruins. Soon your descendants will come back, and all who are trying to destroy you will go away. Look around you and see, for all your children will come back to you. As surely as I live, says the Lord, they will be like jewels or bridal ornaments for you to display.
So this promise that comes through Isaiah is either, I think it's related to when he's already prophesied that they will go into exile. I don't know that they have already gone into exile at that point, but he promises that they will, when they feel like they've been destitute, when they feel like God has deserted them, God says, I will have compassion on the suffering. And Jerusalem's like, you call this compassion? You deserted us. We're in exile. And he's like, whoa, wait. Think about it. Even though they had disobeyed God and had created the circumstances that brought them into exile, and they were suffering the natural consequences of their abandonment of God and their choosing of other ways, God says, a mother would not forget its nursing child. A mother would not forget the child that was born in its womb. I'm not going to forget you. Even if a mother would do that, I'm not going to forget you. And God's really comparing himself again to that maternal instinct that we often see demonstrated in mothers. I was just thinking, some people have brought up the attention to this. The shooting of the 2 deputies in Los Angeles. There's a lot of attention that's been placed on the 31-year-old woman who was one of the 2 deputies. That she was like making sure she has her face half blown off. She's bleeding from her face. And she is like making sure her partner gets behind a pillar where he's safe, tucked down, stuff like that, and then she's calling in for the backup. It was this instinct, she's a mother, and it was this instinct to protect her partner that just kicked in. And I think God a lot of times is like that. He wants to protect us in our vulnerability. He wants to care for us. And he really does have, his first heart is compassion. And when we reject that compassion and we suffer the consequences of our decisions, it breaks his heart. It breaks his heart, and he wants to see us come to a place of healing and wholeness and restoration. And that's what he's promising to Israel here. Now we can jump ahead to the New Testament, and they kind of allude to this one related to Jesus, where Jesus compared himself to a mother hen wanting to draw people in under his wings. And it's, somebody want to read this one?
Start at the top.
Yep.
At that time, some Pharisees said to him, "Get away from here. If you want to live a herd."
Herod, yeah.
Antipas. Herd.
Yeah.
And to put us wants to kill you. Okay. Jesus replied, "Okay, go tell that fox that I keep on casting out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, And third day, I will accomplish my purpose. Yes, today, tomorrow, and the next day. I must proceed on my way, for it wouldn't do for a prophet of God to be killed except in Jerusalem. You know, Leon, I have a question about the other part.
Yeah.
Where it said the mother of nursing wasn't caring about nursing her child.
Yeah.
That brings me back to when I was abused as a child and thrown out that car window at 1.5 years old.
No.
That
Yeah.
kind of got to me a little bit, but I'm okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah,
It's only a story.
Well, no, but I think what they're saying is that it would be unusual for a mother to reject their baby in
It's
that way.
unusual.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they should have thought back then. Back
Yeah.
in the day, it was a lot different than now.
So about Jerusalem, he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now look, your house is abandoned, and you will never see me again until you say, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord." So Jesus was in, I'll just give you kind of a geographic here. If you see where it says Galilee and Perea there, that was the territory that Herod Antipas controlled. And he was in that area. So he was either up by the Sea of Galilee, I think that's actually where he was. He may have been across the Jordan in the Transjordan area. But he was in one of those two areas, and he was healing in that. And Herod had already killed John. And I don't know if these Pharisees were like trying to just intimidate Jesus, or if they were actually genuinely concerned and warning him, saying, "Hey, you may not want to stick around. Herod's going to kill you too. You might want to get out of here," type of a thing. And Jesus makes the point. He's like, "No, it's not going to happen here. It's not my time, not my place." He alludes to how the prophets were commonly killed in Jerusalem. But he's pointing to the fact that he would die in Jerusalem as well, and he needed to be on his way to Jerusalem, just not yet. So he's looking ahead to that time when he will go to Jerusalem and be killed. And he begins to think about the city, which was, God had said that he had written his name on Jerusalem. It had been set aside as his city at that time, the place where people would go to encounter him. And it caused Jesus to mourn, to lament, to say, to really just have this compassionate moment of, in spite of Jerusalem's constant rejection of the prophets and the words of God through the prophets, and now the rejection of him as the Son of God, that still his desire, God's desire, was to protect Jerusalem. But he knew that they wouldn't follow through, they wouldn't receive that protection. And in the end, what he was looking ahead to was 40 years later, 35 years later, when Jerusalem would face destruction under the Romans for the rebellion that they would stage again against the Roman Empire. And he's like, still knowing that that's coming, and knowing that he'll be rejected in Jerusalem, he still has this heart of compassion for the people, this concern for them, knowing what could come of their fate. And I think in this, God demonstrates that he has this type of compassion for us. That even when we offend him, even when we reject him, even when we won't listen to him, still his heart towards us is compassionate. He will allow us to suffer the consequences of our disobedience. But it's not because he's angry. It's not because he doesn't care. But instead his heart And his character is a character of compassion. And I think the same thing is that we, as followers of Jesus, he talks about that in the video, that we demonstrate or should demonstrate that same type of compassion to the world around us. Have compassion on those who are hurting, even when the hurting is a result of their own choices and decisions. We need to have compassion. Just as God has compassion on us, but when our pain is the result of our own hurting decisions, or our own decisions and our own disobedience. We need to have that type of compassion to others. We interact with a lot of people who are dealing with a lot of different stuff. Some of it they've created their own issues. Some of it it's been put on by other people. But it's like when we're interacting with them, we need to have this type of compassion that is willing to protect others. Like it says, like a hen guarding its chicks under its wings, to protect the chicks from whatever danger is going on. So, what kind of stands out to people is thinking through these verses and thinking about God's compassion, or what questions does it raise?
O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and the stone God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather the children together at a hen to catch her chick beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. Now look, the house is abandoned and you never see me again until you say, blessings, oh, the one who comes in the name of the Lord. That's good. You're already ready.
Yeah, we had already read that. It's just kind of going back to it. But still, it's good to remember that. Yeah.
I don't know, I think it encourages us to be mindful of the times when the difference between when God is breathing his wrath or something that God is doing, and the way that God is allowing us to bear our consequences of our own actions. And there's certainly a difference between the two.
I want to say good evening. My name is Rodney. I'm very grateful to cover Dr. Holly. I'm blessed to be here tonight. I'm thankful for all the things that God has given me. I'm grateful for the love He's given me. But when you say compassion, my brother called me this evening before I came here, and we talked. He said, I love you. I told him I love him. That's the compassion that I got out of that.
Yeah. I mean, you've had some hard times with it.
Mm-hmm.
You've had some hard seasons with it. Yeah, to still have love for him is important. What does this tell us about God? And maybe what God would want us to do as a community. Internally, like within our circle, and externally to the community around us.
I don't know. I think for me, it always saying to me that it's still when it's easy, like it's really easy to care and be compassionate when people are doing things that you like. And I think that what it's telling me is that it's the when you really don't want to, is the exact time when you really should. So you really need to bring that compassion, when you just can't stand someone anymore, or they're on your last nerve. So that's the time where that compassion and that grace really needs to be inside. Like if you remember that God has done that for us because we're not dead. We've been given chance after chance after chance, even while we're messing up and flipping our noses at them. It's like you remember that and try to think all those times. Well, you can take me here. You can take me here. You can do this to me here. You remember those moments, and you're able to give those moments, or hopefully to give those moments to people that have that offend us. That I said that we are having trouble with them these days.
Yeah, I think particularly this season, I just think it's easy to get caught up in the of what's going on in our country, and it's easy to be hurt towards people, and I just think, oh God, give me empathy. Help me to understand how people can respond in a way that do sometimes.
And I think it's warfare. It's spiritual warfare right now. I really feel like that because, like, on one hand, it's like you have people talking about human beings as something they can just be written off, and then you're so hurt to hear people talk about that, and you understand what they're saying. It's like that criminals are criminals and they do stupid things that they really maybe sometimes their actions are dumb. And we get that. You understand what they're saying, but just it's still even in that to want to talk about something like somebody that you can write off on this earth, well, you're done. And it's like that and I said, just like I said, going back to that, it's like remember that we haven't had that done to us. But because we've all done those things that to be written off, I'm sure. And to remember that that's been done for us and not to want to do that to someone else. And then when you're dealing with those emotions, trying not to be that person that's writing someone off. It's like, just to deal with your own personal emotions that have them, them turn you into somebody that's facing the same struggle. It's just so ugly and so convoluted. That I think it's just, I said, I think for me that's warfare that I'm going on with on a daily basis. Just so that rears its head everything. It's true. Anything else? Anything stand out, or anything you think God may want us to demonstrate compassion? I know. I think I also really appreciate that Jesus doesn't make it sound like it's easy. I mean, he's the Son of God, and you think, well, this one should be take for him, but he doesn't. I mean, he sees the language, in his. I wouldn't say language, but I think they're not easy responsibility that he's taking. And I think that's a reminder. It's like, it's not going to be easy work.
Because it's a supernatural act, having the kind of compassion and love for people that God has. It requires supernatural help. I mean, a mother's care for children is natural, but to love people and to have compassion for them when they aren't. They're not yours.
Yeah.
And they're not being lovable.
Mm-hmm.
Is another ball game. We need God to help us with that.
I think anybody who's ever been in a school, like I used to teach, I did this in the instructional system. I think it really gives you your perspective on that, but because these are other people's kids. And Leon understood that he was also. It's like, you're taking on some other people's kids, and it's like, like you think that you know, well, you think because you were a kid and when you were a kid in school, like you don't have that perspective. But when you actually get in that classroom, you really start to understand it, like you start to care about it. Like whether you want to or not, it's like you really start to feel like they're yours. And like, and on days it's like you love them, you want to hug them, and you know, they're doing everything you tell them to. And then other days they're like, can you take them back now? Can I send you out of the room? Can you leave? Where's that other kid that I love? You know?
What happened to you?
What happened? But it really does. I mean, I think that was so surprising because, you know, I like kids. I do. I've always loved them. But you don't understand how you really learn to love them until you work. It's like, so I can only imagine as a parent what that must feel.
Mhm.
You know, like in this program I was watching a while back, and this guy said, well, you could take him back and mail him back to the factory. You got to work on him, don't you?
Yeah.
It was on a show, it's about a robot that's a cop, And,
No,
future cop, I don't think you've ever heard of that.
yeah, I remember, yeah.
Jetpack, and I copied it off onto my own copies, and pretty neat show. That's
Yeah.
where I heard that.
You know, thinking of that, I mean, I remember, you know, Cole and I both worked at the same high school as instructional assistants, and I substitute taught occasionally too. And I was substituting this one class that was everybody who was going through Algebra 1 the third time. They really did not want, they didn't care about it. They were not interested, they didn't want to learn anything. Well, okay, I'm not gonna say they didn't want to learn anything. Some of them had legitimate challenges. But some just had this attitude about them. And it was a notoriously rough class. The teacher was always like, man, I feel bad when you gotta take it over for me, but I was like, man, I feel bad for you. Because you're here. You're here every day. But even with that, there were some particular kids that were particularly difficult. But I think I mean, one of them would just like, he'd see me in the parking lot, like, hey, he'd start mocking me in the parking lot and stuff like that. I'm just like, boy,
You are still on school property.
you have some serious, but I was like, God, what is this child's upbringing that he responds in this way to other people? And, you know, you just have to have this compassion of, Lord, I don't know what's pushing him to this end, but it's not a good end for him if he doesn't change. It's hard to see. So, you know, I think that's the type of compassion God wants us to have for people around us. To not let it, it's hard to sometimes not let that stuff get under our skin. But we have to do our best and pray for God to help us always love those who are even unlovable. So.
And I like the fact that, like, just like we're talking about schools, like sometimes, it's like, I think to look for and be open to God is not just for you to do it, but also to be open for God to do it for you, you know, like to bring it into your life. It's like, because like I said, like when I went into that school, I was not expecting to feel that way with children. Like I love them, I do, I really do, and I like them, but not to feel connected to them. Like not to feel like someone else's child of mine who was like one of mine, you know, like something I really cared about, and, you know, I thought about it, you know, when I left school, like, you know, I wonder what's happening with them, like, you know, some of the stories were just absolutely break your heart. You knew that you couldn't go with them to do that. And as I said, it just wasn't something I was expecting. I think you know, be open to things.
Just like that anger comes in there, and you try to brush it off, but it's compassion, but you brush the anger off. That's compassion, but what's wrong with
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll